Hello viewers. Well, I wanted to talk to you about a Watchtower article, specifically the Watchtower article that was considered at the meeting yesterday for many Jehovah's Witnesses. So this article is frankly astonishing. As many of you will know, I'm on Twitter. My handle is CedarsJW Survey. And the great thing about Twitter is people can, alert you when stuff comes up. And one of my Twitter followers alerted me to this paragraph that I'm going to read to you from the Watchtower article that was considered over the weekend. It says, the Bible does mention a Christian woman's being kept safe through childbearing, but this does not mean that giving birth or having children results in gaining everlasting life. Rather, it refers to the fact that a woman's having children to tend to, along with the other aspects of caring for a household, may keep her from falling into a pattern of gossiping and meddling in others' affairs. However, she may still face tribulations linked to marriage and family life. Now, I read these words to Deanna, to my wife, earlier, without telling her what date the Watchtower was. And I said, now tell me, when were these written? What date is the Watchtower that I'm quoting from? And her first reaction was 1950s. And that was her honest reaction. And she could not believe it when I said, no, this is this year. This is 2017. The June 2017 study article that I'm reading from. It does sound like it's come straight out of the 1950s. I mean, as though, I don't need to spell out how it's sexist, but quite clearly you have two stereotypes that are being given. Firstly, that the role of women is to tend to children. Apparently that's just purely the mother's role. Father doesn't have to worry about tending to the children. That's the mother's responsibility, apparently. And if they're not able to tend to children, if they're not mothers, if they haven't procreated, well, they're even more prone, apparently, to gossiping and meddling in others' affairs. Women are being singled out as being prone to gossiping and meddling in others' affairs. This, quite frankly, is material that could only have been written, A, by men, and B, by extremely misogynist men. And, without going into too many details, I've obviously been doing rebuttals now to JW Broadcasting episodes and to the recent convention material. And we do see this pattern of misogyny and sexism. We saw it, for example, in the Remember the Wife of Lot drama that's being shown at this year's convention, where the female characters are invariably cast or written as being extremely, conniving and meddlesome and emotionally unstable, but the male characters are largely okay. So there's definitely this sexist undercurrent. Now, without going into it in huge detail, I'm happy to just point you guys to the quote to see what you think of it. Comment below, please. I thought I'd do two things. Firstly, I would read to you some of the reaction on Twitter, because I did ask on Twitter for people's responses. I'm going to read those to you now. But I also want to play you a recording that shows that sexism and misogyny is just a part of the Watchtower hierarchy. It's embedded, unfortunately, in the leadership. So let's go to Twitter. I tweeted, please tweet me your reaction to this quote from yesterday's Watchtower, and I may include it in my video response. So here are the responses. If I scroll down, Stick Pins, that's Lydia Finch. She said, is it just me, or are they getting more insane as time goes by? Maybe the insanity just changes focus. To which Darren Anderson replied, the closer they get to running onto the rocks, the more insane they will become. And Lydia replied, I think you're probably correct. Seems way more extreme these days than it used to be, closer to the things they used to dislike. So definitely a feeling there that, you know, the organisation's just losing the plot. Covert Fade, who has been on the channel, he's the editor at JW Survey. He said, for the governing body, the 21st century is something that happened to other people. Definitely agree with you there, Covert. AvoidJW.org said, the vast majority of JWs are women, but 100% of the writing committee are men. Go figure. Again, what I was saying earlier, the material in that Watchtower just screams that it's been written purely by men and purely by misogynistic men. Darren Anderson, how will rhetoric influence the young men within the organisation and their attitudes towards women? That's a very good point. It can't be good. It can't be good for young men within the organisation to be exposed to that sort of attitude towards women. And I do think it rubs off. May not be kind of obvious that it's rubbing off, but inevitably it will do. Ranting One said, governing body on women, stop making trouble in our peaceful congregations with your gossip. Make more babies to indoctrinate. Hands off the mics. So yes, again, the focus is on, women pumping out babies and not having any aspirations. Lunatic Soul, and just to think the Australian Commission recommended that sisters be involved in judicial matters where child abuse is involved. Chances? So yes, if you were following the Australian Royal Commission, they were trying to encourage Watchtower to feature women more, especially when dealing with victims. But this Watchtower definitely shows what the real attitude Watchtower has towards women is. Angela Ola says, childbearing certainly didn't stop my mom from being a gossip or meddling, which, that they literally were saying in the Watchtower, if you don't have children, you're more likely to be a gossiper and a meddler. But as Angela's saying, I'm sure we can all think of instances where people who are mothers, just being a mother isn't going to stop you from being that kind of person. Twit Happens has a long comment. They say, a few more thoughts if you're interested, and thanks for sharing it. Still enjoying your videos. I'm 5+ years out and don't regret a thing. So this is a long comment. Let's see what we've got here. It says, this is really interesting. I have a few thoughts that wouldn't fit into a tweet. I think we're all now seeing the blatant sexism and control that goes on. My experience was that I felt like I was always viewed with a slight suspicion as a single sister anyway. There's an assumption there must be something wrong with you if you haven't found a God-fearing window cleaner to settle down with. Might you be homosexual? Are you not doing enough preaching? What's the problem? Definitely couldn't be a total lack of any brother whatsoever on my wavelength. Literally no one to even imagine fancying, let alone marrying and having kids with. I went to uni too, so double whammy. People felt intimidated, uneasy about it. During my baptism questions, it was suggested to me that the men lead because they're better at decision making, less emotional. I was too young and blinded by it all to realise what rubbish it was. Scary to think that the women still have to humbly accept being second best, forced to wear skirts and reduced to busybodies and gossipers if they don't have a man in tow. Well, Twit Happens, I definitely agree with your sentiments there, and I think it is quite obvious that Watchtower's issues with sexism have a latent insecurity behind them. And I also like the fact that you've touched on the sexual repression aspect and the fact that witnesses, including women, are so confined in their choices when it comes to marriage. Daniel Smith, it's quite simple. Women who don't have children are bad, sinful, and women who do have children are also quite likely to be bad or sinful. I think what Danielle is saying there is that Watchtower's view of women is appalling whether or not they have children. Anonymous Idiot says, personally, I think the various wild statements that appear in Watchtowers are a result of factions within the governing body writing committee. While it's certainly possible that not everyone on the writing committee has that view, you would certainly hope that not all members of the writing committee have that view. Brynjard Hansen, hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Are women still just property for Watchtower? What kind of person thinks this is all right? Very well said. Jane Persian, I'll leave you guys to figure out what JFC stands for. Camille says, I was not well liked among the JW boys because I was so openly against the submissive woman role. The wife and kids life is just not for me. To which Jones replies, same, hence why I was a spinster at age 20 and advised to wait for the second wave of eligible brothers. Widow if I got lucky. Camille replies, I left when I was 20, but most of the girls in my hall my age were already married or engaged. When I went to college, it made it even worse, at least from their perspective. I have never regretted going to college and leaving the JWs. And finally, Graham Hammond. Governing body members are exposed to only a tiny sample of rank-and-file female JWs and even fewer worldly women. They have no idea of life in the real world. So, some interesting responses there. Many of my Twitter followers responding with understandable shock, stroke outrage at, you know, the brazenness really of what's been written in that Watchtower article. But I did just want to again show you a recording that indicates that this is by no means a one-off. This is basically indicative of a tone of sexism and misogyny that has always been in the Watchtower hierarchy. And the best way of demonstrating this is to play you this recording of governing body member Samuel Hurd from the 1970s when he was doing travelling overseer work. So let's listen to Samuel Hurd.
You know, scientists say that the cranial capacity of a woman is 10% smaller than that of a man. So now this shows that she's just not equipped for the role of headship. Her role is one of subjection to the man. Her role is that of submissiveness, and that means that she should recognize that she is a woman and be glad to be a woman. Never want to be what you are not equipped to be. But we'll hear a sister say, oh, if I were an elder, I'd show them a thing or two. Or sometimes we hear them say, oh, if I were a man, I do this and I do that. As if to be wishing to be something that he's not designed to be. Do you know what that borders on? That borders on homosexuality. And you know what the devil is doing nowadays? He's taking women who want to be men. He makes men out of it. And you know what else he's doing? He's taking men who want to be women. And he's making women out of it. And it's spreading. It's not a little thing. But homosexuality is something that is spreading. And it's all over the earth. It's not just here, in San Francisco and Oakland, but it's everywhere. But it all begins with a thought. Somewhere, individuals have wanted to be what they are not designed to be. And they've nurtured that. Will never voice the thought of wanting to be what you're not cut out to be. Be glad to be what you are, a woman. Your role in the earth is a beautiful role that Jehovah God has placed you in.
So that recording is believed to date to 1971. And what's interesting is that Sam Hurd essentially quotes from a 1967 Awake, which talks about the cranial capacity of women being smaller than that of men. Now, this is just frankly nonsense. Yes, I think on average there is a slightly smaller cranial capacity for women, but that has nothing to do with intelligence, because women on average have a higher density of, I think, grey matter than men do. So it all perfectly evens out when you actually look into the details of it. But so interesting that Samuel Hurd would leap on that detail that had been published in an Awake as evidence that women aren't as intelligent as men, as meaning that women should know their place, that it's wrong for them to aspire to any positions of responsibility or leadership, and that if they do aspire to any positions of responsibility or leadership, well, that's tantamount to homosexuality, because they are ignoring the role that God has assigned for them. So absolutely astonishing. I mean, whether Samuel Hurd still feels that way, whether he still has those ideas, you would have to ask him. But at least at one point, in his role as a senior leader among Jehovah's Witnesses, because again, he was a traveling overseer when he said this, this was the wisdom that he conveyed from the platform. So this really is not a new thing that we saw in the Watchtower article. Sexism and an appalling view of women is just part of the Watchtower thinking, the Watchtower hierarchy's thinking. So anyway, I just wanted to share that quote with you, some of the reaction and some background from Watchtower history. I hope you found this video interesting. As always, don't forget to subscribe if you want to see similar videos, and thank you for watching.